most legislators, whether Democratic or Republican, privately believe that climate change is the greatest challenge facing humanity today. What they need is the political cover and the moral support to come out of the closet and make that declaration. And the faith community is perhaps the most suitable sector to provide them with that political cover to make that declaration. So we're trying to do, and is the Call to Conscience on Climate Disruption, and I can send you the website and on FCNL's, it's on the energy page on FCNL's website. It's a multi-faith but also citizens-based grassroots campaign with a Hill component where we are reaching out to moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats to issue a bipartisan call to action recognizing the dangers of climate change and a commitment to act. We think this is the first step that they need to act, because we hearken to the first tenet of Alcoholics Anonymous, that in order to solve a problem, you must first admit you have one. At this particular time, Congress does not admit to this problem because we have one party which doesn't admit to it. Therefore, they're not even solving the problem. They're not even talking about the problem. So we are having multi-faith delegations visit with their representatives, regardless of the party, to issue this moral call to action, encourage them to talk amongst themselves, the legislators to talk amongst themselves, to figure out a way for them to issue this bipartisan declaration. We've done this, we've been doing this for over a year. We visited approximately 30 legislators in 10 states, and I can't tell you how timely this is because just today, one of our interfaith delegations met with their Republican legislator who said that he would do this. He would talk to his colleagues. This is our first major significant step. Well, we've tried many other legislators, but this is our first major significant hold within Congress to get this conversation rolling. Our approach, and this is a faith-based approach, is to call to partnership. We are not seeking to call out or play a game of gotcha with any politician. It is in a way, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it is a different approach. It's kind of the anti-LCV approach, the League of Conservation Voters approach. Many of you know back in the 2012 elections, they had a Flat Earth 5 and they had a Dirty Dozen, and they were just going after climate deniers. There is a validity to that in and of itself, but from the faith community's perspective, or at least from our perspective, this initiative's perspective, we want to act in partnership with anyone, and we don't want to come with a sense of judgment or vindictiveness. We want to all work together because we recognize that we absolutely need the Democrats and the Republicans in a bipartisan fashion to create that momentum to deal with the climate crisis. This cannot be a win or lose situation. It has to be a together situation, and the faith community is uniquely poised to offer this space, this non-judgmental, welcoming partnership space that allows for this growth, for this organic growth within our democratic institutions to make this happen. So I welcome you, if you're interested in doing this, to join our effort. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll open up for questions following the rest of the presentations. So thank you for your time, for listening.
Thank you, Jose.
Sure.
So we've thought a little bit about why the religious community has a unique role to play in this work, and about why the work itself is so critical. I want to talk a little bit about some of how this can happen. How can religious communities get involved in climate advocacy? And I'll first just say a minute about about why. About why I think it's actually a really important thing to include in your repertoire, because at Interfaith Power and Light, we're working with congregations on different things. We're working on education about environmental issues in our congregations. We're working on doing greening to actually live in a greener way in our facilities and at home. And both of those, I think, are really critical and important ways of taking climate issues seriously as religious people. But I find that so often these issues feel so huge, and the solutions we can be part of feel so small by comparison. And in my experience, it's really only advocacy campaigns that start to invite people to join together beyond the walls of the congregation with, being part of solutions for your whole state or even for the whole country, that start to feel like they're on a scale that feels truly meaningful to the scope of the problem. And so I think in terms of cultivating hope and a hopeful spirit in your community, even if you haven't previously engaged in advocacy, or it's still a relatively new idea for you, I would encourage you to find ways to think about beginning to include it in your repertoire of green activities, because I really do think it helps people stay hopeful to be able to be part of things that are bigger than themselves in a way that feels like it's starting to be appropriate to the global scale of the problem. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I've seen be helpful to congregations in doing environmental advocacy as faith communities, and to think about how you might begin this kind of activity even if you haven't done it in the past. The first is to be yourself, to help form a point of contact in your community that will be in touch with a trusted local activist organization. I would suggest to the DC metro area folks that Interfaith Power and Light would be ideal in that role. And I know there are a few folks on the phone from other parts of the country, and I believe each of those parts of the country also have IPLs that I would recommend forming relationships with. So it's going to be very hard in a congregation, especially one that is new to these issues, to have each campaign, each opportunity, each bill number or legislative opportunity kind of arise as a brand new issue that the community has to become educated about and build trust with the activists around and get completely comfortable with before they can take any action. If you have a trusted relationship over time with, rather than thinking about getting involved in one campaign at a time, starting from scratch, to think about this as a kind of a journey where we're going to be in relationship together, the Congregational Green Contact and Interfaith Power and Light are going to be in trusting relationship with each other for the long haul. Each season, each time will bring new campaigns, new opportunities, new advocacy issues that are moving, and over time, as the congregation has experience working together with other groups through IPL, that initial trust building of getting ready to be on board with the next campaign, the next opportunity, I think will diminish as we become long-standing allies to each other. I see Interfaith Power and Light's role is as providing a steady diet of advocacy opportunities to religious communities that are interested in doing environmental advocacy work. And I can't tell you right now what those opportunities will be in a few months even, because they're always sort of coming up. But if we're in conversation with each other, if we're in relationship with each other, that will be enough. Those opportunities will arise. And I promise you will get many of them. You are going to be the expert on which activity or which campaign is a good match for your community, and which activities are the right way to get a congregation started on environmental advocacy. So we send out all those opportunities, but it's really for you to think about what's the right, best way to get my community started in environmental advocacy. I just wanted to highlight a few of the sort of forms that religious community engaging in environmental advocacy could take. So there's a few. One is to engage people in taking action when they are already gathered in your congregation, to take advantage of those opportunities when people already have come together. So in many churches in particular, I've seen environmental groups set up a table after church, after services, when everyone gathers for fellowship hour, and that there's an opportunity to sign an EPA comment postcard or some kind of petition right there, and people have this opportunity to take action in a very easy way when they're there anyway. In Jewish communities, that could be at the Sunday school carpool line or at the Purim Carnival. Anytime that people at the congregation are coming together already, the environmental group can think about making easy opportunities for taking action available. And I noticed that Lavona from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington is on the call, and I know that at their church they have a kind of quick action table where almost every single Sunday congregants know that if they want to do one good thing on advocacy action, they can stop by that table and there will be various quick, meaningful actions they can take right there after church. A second thing that can be very meaningful for congregations to get involved is to participate in a larger rally. And often Interfaith Power and Light will organize what we call a multi-faith contingent. In other words, a place where faith communities can march visibly together as a faith communities in a larger rally or march for an environmental issue. The photo that you're seeing now on top right is Maybelle Kagi, a Green Team leader from the Episcopal Church of the Ascension in Silver Spring, made her own banner, her own sign to come speak out against mountaintop removal mining as part of a multi-faith contingent in a larger rally. And we found that it's a really powerful experience for people of faith to be visible to each other and walking together, and then visible to everyone else as part of larger rallies on environmental issues. There are often opportunities to make it easy for people and make it kind of social, offering to do a carpool from the congregation building so that everyone from your community is going together and the outing is joint, or planning to get a meal together after the rally or before, just thinking about ways to say, we're doing this together, please join me, and making participation in an advocacy rally or march a congregational activity that people do with people they know and trust from the congregation. Finally, there are occasional opportunities through our work to testify for city councils, testify for state legislative committees, testify to the EPA or to the State Department, or even go on lobby visits, as Jose alluded to, directly with elected representatives. And that's the kind of thing that if you stay connected to Interfaith Power and Light and let us know that that's the kind of opportunity that you're open to, when the moment is right, when there's a particular issue in your community that's where you're a part of an important constituency for a particular issue, we'll try and make sure that you know that you have an opportunity to speak out. On that bottom left, that's Elizabeth Stevens, our DC program coordinator, speaking to the DC City Council about cleaning up the clean energy law earlier this year. We found that for people of faith, testifying as part of testifying as a person of faith is incredibly powerful for the people who do it. It is a really powerful experience for the Green leaders from congregations to really reflect on their own motivations and articulate for themselves why they want to see the changes that they're speaking out for. And it's also incredibly powerful at getting attention from those legislators or leaders that they're speaking to. It really takes people by surprise still when someone speaks from their spiritual tradition directly to a matter of environmental policy issue. So those are three forms that this kind of action might take. I wanted to offer just one word to the wise, which is that as much as possible, I think, especially if you're just starting out and the congregation, Shanta mentioned, opened with a reflection about the fact that many of us attend congregations where not everyone is already on the same page politically about everything, and that I think it's often, you often want to avoid proposing any kind of action that will kind of require the whole congregation in a formal way to get on board with a particular policy issue, because that will trigger a lot of committee meetings, and the board will need to vote maybe on whether the community can sign on to something or endorse something publicly. And that's, to me, like that is something that might be very far down the road. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax passed an entire climate change resolution on behalf of the entire congregation that committed the entire congregation to meaningful action on climate change. That's been a very powerful thing for them, but it took many years to get the congregation to a place where everyone was ready to do that. So if you're just starting out, I would strongly encourage you to just make opportunities available to any individuals in the community that are ready to participate or that are interested. Make an opportunity to sign a postcard available. Let people know that the environmental committee is going to organize a carpool to a rally if anyone would like to join. Invite without triggering any kind of congregation-wide need for a lot of process, because I think that will, if there are 3 people in your community who are ready to do this, let's invite them and start them getting involved even before you're ready to have the whole community on record. So I think those are some of my, I'll tell a little bit about, so these photos that we see now are from several years of rallies in support of offshore wind power in Maryland. And in a minute we'll hear from Yvonne, whose community really got started in environmental advocacy through that ultimately successful campaign. I just wanted to just highlight one. There are many, I told you I won't be able to tell you all of the advocacy opportunities that will be coming up in the next year, and that's the case because things are always changing and the opportunities arise very quickly. But one thing I do know is coming down the pike, so I wanted to just say a little bit about it, is that historically, up until now, and even right now, there are no limits on absolutely no limits nationally on carbon pollution, the pollution that traps heat and causes climate change. The EPA finally has proposed a rule. One rule is already proposed, and that would limit carbon pollution from new power plants. But the really significant rule is that there's a rule coming out, we expect June 1st, that will put limits on carbon pollution from existing power plants. In other words, it would put national limits on the single greatest source, the U.S., our country's single greatest source of the heat trapping climate pollution that is causing our Earth to warm. So EPA rules come out in a proposed form. This one will come out on June 1st, and then there's a public comment period, a certain amount of time during which sometimes there are hearings, but there's always an opportunity to send in postcards or comments, written comments, sharing how you feel about the proposed rule. And you can bet that every industry group that does not want to see the EPA put any limits on climate pollution will use that comment period to say that they don't want to see this move forward. And in fact, there is lots and lots of ways that people anticipate efforts to interfere with these rules, both litigation and perhaps Congress trying to meddle with the process. So we really see a powerful opportunity coming up starting in June for faith communities to make sure that we use that public comment period to speak out on behalf of our own communities and say, based on our values and our commitments and our convictions, we want to support the EPA in putting these limits on climate pollution and continuing to take important steps to limit carbon pollution. We will probably develop faith community postcards that you can and distribute during that time. So it'll be coming down the pike, but I wanted to have everyone put that on their radar because it's coming up very quickly. And on the resource document, you'll see that one of our ally groups called the National Religious Partnership for the Environment is actually organizing a briefing call on April 30th to give the faith community a chance to learn more, in particular, about that upcoming EPA rule, so that you feel really ready to speak out in support of it when it comes out. You can RSVP there and get the call-in information if that interests you. So with that, I want to hand it off to Yvonne because I've talked only sort of generally about what this might look like, and I think it's important to hear a story of what it actually did look like for one community. So Yvonne, take it away.
Hi. Thanks for that introduction, Joelle. It's like you, I feel like Jose and Joelle are very tough acts to follow, but I will do my best. So I'm the director of Kanfeina Sharim, which is an organization that teaches about what Jewish tradition says about protecting the environment. And we also have a network that we've been managing called Jewcology, which is a website where Jewish environmentalists from all around the world can share resources and ideas with each other. And over the last few years, I've been having this coming to realization about the importance of political advocacy as the next step in environmental engagement. So in the Jewish environmental movement, which I've been involved with for 10 years, we've been focusing a tremendous amount of energy in Jewish learning and individual and communal action. But there hasn't been that much activity when it comes to advocacy. And in particular, in my organization, a couple of years ago, we did a year of Jewish learning on the environment, where we created 18 comprehensive sets of material on what Jewish tradition teaches about taking care of the environment. And those I provided our website in the resource guide in case that information is valuable to you. There's a really, really strong wealth of resources about faith-based Jewish resources about protecting the environment on all these different topics. And then last year we followed up on that with a year of action. We said, well, learning leads to action. And so we encourage people to take personal and communal action to protect the environment. But as we started to talk about this year, I started to really think about how learning and personal and even communal action aren't sufficient. It was really like Joelle was saying, they're just not big enough to really address the huge problems that we're facing. And that what we really need to start doing is joining together with other communities, with other people of faith, and with broad constituencies to raise our voices and influence change at the policy level, where it can have a much wider impact than solar panels on a synagogue, which is also a very important activity. But there's a bigger opportunity at the policy level to really make the kind of change that Joelle and Jose have been talking about. So this year, in partnership with the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life, we've been organizing a year of Jewish policy engagement on the environment, where we've been encouraging Jewish individuals and communities to become more aware of the opportunity to make a difference at the policy level. And so some of the things we've been doing, so it started in January, so some of the things I've been doing is leading webinars to help Jewish environmentalists understand the very basics of advocacy, and providing tools and action campaigns that can make a bigger policy difference. And what we see ourselves as doing, this is kind of a initial effort to put policy and advocacy awareness on the radar of the Jewish environmental community and planting seeds that will help our community engage more deeply in environmental advocacy over time. And so for myself, my own experience is partially comes out of this experience of working with Interfaith Light and specifically with Joelle a few years ago on this wind power campaign. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what that experience was like for me, and I'll explain about this Tu B'Shvat card in a moment. So I really was afraid to engage in environmental policy in my community, and I am part of an Orthodox Jewish community where political views differ widely. And I really felt concerned that people might get angry at me or write nasty things about me on our email list. And we're really embedded in this community. It's my home, and it's like where my friends live. My son goes to school here. I really didn't want to be put in an uncomfortable situation of feeling like I was advocating for something that people wouldn't agree with or might say things about. But I also feel that protecting the environment is important, and what I started to understand is that even though there are some people who may disagree and some people who may agree, there were a whole lot of people who just didn't know nearly enough about the environment, and there wasn't a lot of talking going on about it. So what I did in order to kind of get the conversation started was create what we call the sustainability circle, a group of people who care about the environment and could give each other support for environmental actions. So I kind of thought of it as like a book club or maybe a support group for environmentalists in the community, a place where people who have sort of varying levels of knowledge with some environmental interests could come together, talk about issues of importance, learn about different kinds of things, and learn from each other. And so I started that group in 2010, and we started having regular gatherings. And we did like a whole series of different topics. We learned about the local recycling rules. We learned about composting, community-supported agriculture available to our community. We heard from local members, one local member who was raising goats, and there was another local member who was raising chickens. We live in Silver Spring. We're not like out in the farmlands, but there were some people raising small livestock who wanted to share their stories. We got to meet the chickens. And we sort of formed a connection with each other and created a place in the community for these kinds of conversations. And then we also formed a relationship with Joelle, who started to kind of participate periodically in our programs and sort of form a relationship with our work. And so that we started to be able to have this relationship with Interfaith Power and Light. And then the next year, Joelle came to me and told me about this amazing opportunity. And it is kind of amazing how, like, you just really have no idea what that opportunity might be, and how it's like, I'm sure that every faith tradition has some sort of kind of thing like this where you have to like prepare before the opportunity arises. But after we had been meeting for more than a year, the offshore wind power bill came up in committee in the Maryland House of Delegates, and it turned out that our local representative, Ben Kramer, was playing an important role in trying to get this bill out of committee. And so because we had already built these sort of existing community networks and people knew me as somebody who cared about this, we could use those networks to encourage people to support wind power. And it really was, like Joelle said, I didn't need the community to vote on it. That would have been a really bad idea. But there were a group of people who were supportive and who wanted to learn more and be involved, and that group of people was really all that it took. So since we already had this opportunity for people to meet, we had a presentation in one of our regular gatherings from someone in the Maryland Energy Administration. And they told us that there would be time when we needed to make phone calls. And they also, Joelle came and brought us some lawn signs, is that what they're called? yard signs to put on our lawns and gave them out. That was the first time I ever put a lawn sign, a sign on my lawn, saying that I supported wind power. And then at a key moment, there was a town hall meeting where Delegate Kramer was going to be represented, and I was able to share Jewish sources about protecting the environment and thank Delegate Kramer for his commitment to the people of Montgomery County and the people of Maryland, and also ask him to continue to show leadership by making offshore wind power a reality in Maryland. And he has a really good relationship with our community, and I don't think that he knew that there were people in our community who really cared about this topic. And so in the beginning of 2012, we sent Delegate Kramer his first ever Tu B'Shvat card. Tu B'Shvat is the Jewish New Year of the trees. He himself is Jewish. We wished him, so Joelle and I spent some time thinking about what the right way to do this is. Every year there are different kinds of activities that take place during this New Year of the trees in the Jewish community. And we were having a Seder, a group of people getting together, and that's their picture, who we were having an activity. And this group of people was very involved and interested and willing to be in a picture and to be part of this message to Delegate Kramer. And so we decided we weren't going to, be pushy. We weren't going to be negative. We were just going to thank him for his support. And so this message came to him with this group of people, kind of diverse group of people within our community saying, we care about this and thank you for your support. And so Delegate Kramer then changed his position to supporting the bill, and the bill was voted successfully out of committee. And the bill passed the following year, and so now we're on our way to having offshore wind in Maryland. And for me, this was such an empowering experience because I thought it was going to be much, much more difficult to have this kind of influence. I had envisioned the kinds of things where you'd have to get everybody on board and be unpopular and like have to fight with people. But really it just took a group of people who were already committed and already knew each other and were willing to step up. And I started to understand through this process about how advocacy is really about owning our power as citizens, and that there's a responsibility as a citizen to own that power, because if we don't use it, it will be taken by others, and there are plenty of others who want to take it. But I hadn't realized that our small community could make a meaningful difference when we had built networks of community support and had the connections to the experts at IPL who could tell us when to act, and we were willing to own our power and stand up for what we cared about in the right moment. So what worked about this activity was our relationship with Interfaith Power and Light, and the fact that we had a group of committed activists who were already in touch. And then this opportunity to make a difference that we couldn't foresee at the time we created the group, and also the relationship that I had with my community, because I already had this really strong relationship, and I had done it and built that relationship in a really friendly, non-confrontational kind of way. But since we had this kind of trust between us, and I had trust with IPL, we were able to form this relationship, and so I was able to provide the people who could play this role. So in conclusion, I just want to say that I don't know about everybody else, but I've been kind of feeling like our democracy is broken. But I also feel like it's only us who can fix it. Because we are the citizens, and the system was created for citizens to take this kind of power. But if we don't do it, then who will? It's really in our hands to be the citizens and to be willing to step up and own that power. And I've just been imagining the difference that we could all make together if we took that power into our hands and used it for the things that we really care about. So it's because of that feeling that really we do have power as citizens if we can just come together and use it and figure out how to use it effectively, that I wanted to be part of this webinar and share this story and encourage everyone to take that power into our hands for ourselves and for our communities to make a difference for the environment.
Thank you, Yvonne. That was great. So now, after we've heard from 3 great speakers, we're going to open it up to Q&A. I'm going to unmute the line in a moment. If it gets a little bit too chaotic, I'll mute it again. Again, people are welcome to submit questions by hitting that Ask a Question button towards the top of your screen. And then you're also welcome to just chat it in the chat screen, or you can also share comments or suggestions in the chat screen. So
you are now unmuted. You are now muted.
Okay. Muting it again, since that was a little bit loud.
If everyone who is on the phone can mute their own line by pressing *6, and then Karen will try again to unmute the line.
You are now unmuted.
Okay, so I'll get us started off with.
You are now muted.
With the first question, this is from one of our green leaders, David Kepley. This is an interesting question. He writes, I'm concerned about having our churches suggest that God is on our side of the issue. How do you think we can address this real concern? And David, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more about what your concern is about talking about that, and then invite any of the speakers to provide feedback. And if anyone on the call has an interesting thought, feel free to chat it. I don't know if he's on.
So I can start by saying that that I think it's always dangerous to claim to have the last word about what what our tradition teaches, or what the right way to live out our faith with respect to a specific policy issue would look like. But I do think that those of us who are trying to make the case for environmental action in our communities do need to frame our arguments in terms of the core beliefs and commitments of the communities where we're doing that work. So often I talk to green team leaders and I say, why do you feel it's important to do environmental work in your community? And they say, we had 5 awesome initiatives this year. And they tell me about how they sold fair trade coffee, and they tell me about the garden, but they are often struggle to speak articulately about why they have such a strong feeling that to live out their faith fully and in a whole way would require them to take action on this issue, environmental issue. Yvonne talked about some of the really fantastic Jewish environmental resources that are out there, but each of our traditions have people who are thinking theologically about making the case from our scriptures about why environmental action is important. And I would encourage anyone who seeks to move your community to being environmental advocates to really root down into those teachings and traditions and make your case in a way that is that speaks to your own sense of what you feel called to do, that speaks about your sense of what the community's values are about, and speaks to what you see as the right way today to live out those teachings and those values in our modern time.
Joelle, this is David. I don't know if you can hear me. Am I still muted?
No, you're here.
Okay, good. The point of my question was, and I appreciate that answer. That's a very powerful answer, and it's basically the road I've been trying to cling to myself. I guess the bridge I'm always trying to cross, which is always difficult, is from those theological concepts to very practical Senate Bill S2145 or whatever the heck it is that we're doing. Drawing that bridge is not always easy, and you can kind of lose people as you move from one realm to another. The
other thing I've discovered is that working with people on other kinds of greening activities, the transition to advocacy can happen very smoothly because it's just an extension of the same values people have already been expressing. So I think part of what I love about Yvonne's story is that once the community was sort of already understood itself to care about the environment, and that so far had looked like meetings about local produce and meetings about chickens and meetings about recycling, then when the time came and they said, and I sort of came to them and said, well, would it also include being an advocate for offshore wind power in your community? Because they already had this self-understanding as people who care about environmental issues, that next ask, even though it was a transition into a different realm, felt very continuous with what they were already saying they were about and caring about in their group. So so I think that's the other way to do lots of work in your community that's not advocacy based, that's about people getting a chance to get in touch with their own commitments to green work and taking action in practical ways in their communities, and then kind of sneak an activist ask in there, and it will just feel like the next natural way to live out the same values they've already been expressing.
A great answer. Thank you.
I should also say, I mean, this is Yvonne, we didn't get into a lot of technical details when we encouraged people to support wind power. We told them to support, we said, do you support renewable energy? Do you think that wind power is good? And that was, it was sufficient for the people who were already committed. So we didn't have to go into like the bill number. We just had to say our delegate matters for renewable energy, and without getting into all of the minutiae, people were willing to step forward.
And I find that only increases as people's trusting relationship over time with environmental advocates strengthens. So, the longer you've been working with a particular ally, when they come and say, okay, this year we're working on strengthening Maryland's clean energy law, and then the next year they say, okay, this year we're working on trying to stop this huge liquefied natural gas export facility. The amount of questioning and double checking and scrutiny that the community has to go through on each campaign, I think, diminishes as people's sense of like an ongoing relationship with a trusted activist deepens.
Great, thanks. We'll move on to the next question. This question is for you, Jose. The question is, when you've gone to representatives who have disagreed with you, what points do they make to sort of defend their position?
It's kind of a interesting layered approach that we're seeing, and fortunately a gradually disintegrating one. First is that in the past it's been Republicans, and I don't mean this in a partisan way, but this is just the people that we are hearing this response consistently from. The first layer is climate change isn't real. That is starting to be peeled away, where you have many representatives saying, okay, climate change is happening, but it's not man-made. So we're getting that layer peeled, and the next layer that we're getting is, okay, climate change is real, and maybe it's human-caused, but what percentage of it is human-caused? And I'd like an answer to that. So we're seeing those gradations, and that's generally the response when we ask for what is your position on climate disruption. And with that gradual disintegration, it's been encouraging. We also, though, sort of cut through that veil, and we've put in a couple of times, we know you know. We know you know the science. We just want to help you. And so the response has been, we're interested and we'll get back to you. That's been the majority response. And so it requires additional coaxing, especially from their constituents, to continue to consider the call. And so that's where this dynamic has gone. But as I've mentioned to you today, we had a representative saying he's willing to talk with his peers about this. We've also had other representatives say, I'm really interested. I'm just looking for that other person to talk to. And we think this afternoon, we may have found that person.
I did want to just make a note for folks who are worried about the level of climate denial in your own communities that public opinion research about what people out there in the American public think about climate science is that only a tiny little fraction, well, unfortunately, only a small fraction are very alarmed about climate change. That's all of us and some others, but there are not a ton of people in that circle. But it's also important to note that the number of folks who express the kind of denial or skepticism about climate science that Jose described in Congress is also a tiny little circle, and that the vast majority of people that you're speaking to when you're speaking to the American public or the little section of it that's coming to your congregation are somewhere in the middle. They're concerned, confused, listening, they're curious, but not out and out deniers. So I think Yvonne touched on this too, the importance of just educating people about issues and building trust with them, but know that you're not, in my work, I almost never spend time fighting it, duking it out with people about the basic science of climate change. I come from an assumption that I'm speaking to folks who are open and listening, and that the science, as far as I'm concerned, is, from what I've learned, is settled. 97% of scientists agree, and the real question is, what are we going to do about it, and how can we work together on responding?
Great, thanks, Joelle. I actually have a question of my own that I think all the speakers have touched upon it a little bit, but I would love to hear more reflections on this. And then we'll wrap up the Q&A. So my question is, when it comes to greening our personal lives or lowering the carbon footprint of our congregations, I think it can be a really seductive thing, and certainly it's worthwhile, but I think it can be seductive because it feels like we're making a tangible difference, like we can actually measure the reduction in energy that we are consuming. But I think that we can get so wrapped up into it that becomes the only thing we think about when it comes to engaging with climate change. And then when I think about advocacy, sometimes it can feel like a hopeless political battle because I think about coming up against big money and big corporations, and I don't know if I'm making a difference. So I would just love to hear reflections from the speakers about coming up against the intangibility of getting involved in political campaigns.
This is Jose, and I just loved Yvonne's thoughts about the importance of citizen engagement in politics and how empowering it can be when you jump into that fray. And when you do speak, and we at FCNL, we do lobby training for our citizens, for our constituents, and we also did it for a group of 7th graders, actually, Haverford Friends School 7th graders, who then lobbied their representatives as well as their staff, that it is a very doable exercise and very empowering, and it is the exercise that we need to do. I wanted to just harken back to that phrase of Bill Moyers, that the only antidote to organized money is organized people. This is what we need to do in this particular case.
Yvonne, did you have a thought about that? I also have one.
No, I mean, I think the way. so I would just really reference what Joelle said, that I think what makes advocacy feel real is that it's at the scale where you might even feel like you could begin to address the problem, and so that is a very important factor when people feel so helpless, and like even like their investments in their own home is only just kind of feels like a drop in the bucket. But if we all come together, then there's this sense of shared power, and a sense of actually having the opportunity to make a difference at this bigger level. So so it might be a little bit intangible, but it's also like bigger, and so I feel like there's something really powerful about that.
I just had one thought in response to Karen's question, which is that there are a variety of reasons that people are very frustrated with congressional action on climate right now, and I am so grateful to those like Jose who are continuing to hammer away on that front. But there's so many exciting opportunities at the state and local level right now. Particularly in Maryland, which I know is only one of the regions that we serve, but in Maryland there are, opportunities for Maryland to become a national leader on clean energy, to pass really progressive legislation that wouldn't be possible in all parts of the country right now. And as Yvonne described, because state legislators are representing a much smaller group of people than national legislators, the amount of community organizing you need to do to get their attention and surprise them with a two-Bishvat card is really much more modest. It really, there's something very, that's closer to the ground about state-level politics, and it's also a place where more exciting things are happening on the climate front at the moment. We have a group out in Fairfax called the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions, that grew out of the Climate Action Group at Unitarian Universalist Church of Fairfax, and they've actually started thinking about what could the county board of Fairfax do to take action on climate change, and they're really getting a lot of attention because not that many people come to those board meetings because it's such a very super local politics. It just doesn't take a whole lot of very motivated, focused people to get on the radar of the local and state level politics. So one answer to how do you not feel hopeless about it is, I think, look for opportunities that are at the state and local level. And that was just one thing I would encourage people to embrace as an opportunity. So thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to all of our speakers, and to everyone who's sort of part of the conversation. So we usually conclude these gatherings together with an opportunity for a Green Team leader in our community to kind of share a conundrum, something they've been struggling with or reflecting on in their work, and then give us a chance to respond and reflect on the question together. So our conundrum tonight comes from David Kepley from Providence Presbyterian.
Well, I'm happy to be the bearer of a conundrum. I very much enjoyed the discussions that Jose and Yvonne and Joelle brought to the table. I thought those were excellent, and I think I learned a tremendous amount from them. So I stand in your debt at the beginning here. Let me thank you for that. Our church began its Green Quest about a couple of years ago, and by completing an environmental audit, which our overall denominations put together. It's kind of a list of best practices. And so it took some difficulty getting people together and just getting this off the ground. But we passed the audit. We passed the recertification, so those are all good things. And so we put together a series of goals, and the conundrum I'm kind of dealing with is, okay, strategically, it's easy to pick off one little thing after another at the congregational level, but I don't feel like I've got a strategic vision. And I think that's the question I want to put before the group is I've developed a set of goals, and I won't read them, but I'll just summarize them for you. Just 3 goals. 1, to make our church a better steward of the environment, to inspire our members so they carry their concern for their creation out into the world, to be good stewards in their homes and their businesses, and to demonstrate to our community through formal certification that we've made a commitment to caring for the creation. So that's our goals, and the 4 areas in which we apply for our certification are the areas of worship, facilities, education, and outreach. And there's all kinds of little things that we can do and bigger things that we can do. And I guess what I'm sort of struggling with is, okay, a sense of direction. And I kind of like what Yvonne was saying, because I think we did pretty much what you were doing when you said at the beginning, you said, well, the first thing you want to do is get rooted in your spiritual tradition. And we did have, I led a class a couple of years ago on that to try to get rooted in that so as to deflect any kind of criticism from anybody saying that this is, you know, Mother Earth worship or something silly like that, which it's not. And so we've kind of gone out from there, and then we've picked up a few smaller things like fair trade coffee, and now we're thinking about having green meetings and that sort of thing. But I feel like we're picking off one thing at a time, but we're not. We don't have a larger vision which can drive us into the future and can say, you know, you can do these little things here, but they really don't make as much of a difference as if you did these 1 or 2 things here. So I would welcome comments from any of the folks on the webinar to figure out how do you get a sense of direction and what really would matter and what would make a big difference, and so that we move to those things at the outset.
Great. So how do you decide what to do first?
Yeah. Or second.
Or second. So as before, you're welcome to share thoughts by typing in the Q&A box or the chat box, but we'll also try one more time to unmute the line and see if it's quiet enough.
You are now unmuted.
Does anyone have responses for David's question?
This is Yvonne. I'll answer that.
You are now muted.
Based on my own experience, I think there are 2 ways to go about it in terms of prioritizing. One would be in terms of impact, and the other is in terms of community interest. What I found a lot in communities is that the most effective way to make a difference is to capitalize on the structures that already exist in a community. So trying to figure out, you know, are there ways to embed this in the program in various different, you know, times of the year or times when these kinds of opportunities are available. So I'm trying to think of a good example, like I've been in places where there's like a sisterhood, and the sisterhood does regular programs. Could one of those programs be an environmental education program? Those kinds of things. So like to find the strong parts of the congregation where there's already some momentum going, and where an environmental message could be integrated, or an environmental program, and partnering with them to kind of find out where the community interest is and where the momentum is, and build in that direction. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, and I was curious, I mean, I would imagine that the audit probably would have given you some priorities in terms of which things would have the most environmental impact, right?
Yes. Well, it does, because you get points for different things, and obviously you get more points for facilities kinds of things because that lowers your carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. But you also get points for doing things like offering classes, as you did, and you know, providing different worship opportunities, as well as mission and advocacy kinds of activities too. So we're pretty strong on worship and education, and pretty good on facilities. We do very little in mission and advocacy, which is why I was interested in hearing you guys all talk about how to get going on that area.
I mean, I think that if I were trying to figure out where to start, I would probably look where the interest and momentum already exists in the community and try and build in that direction, and see if you can get some momentum going in the direction where people already are interested in being involved, and then build from there. That would just be my suggestion in terms of thinking about starting where your community is, and figuring out what kinds of actions and what kinds of advocacy would be would already be of interest and excitement to parts of your congregation.
I wanted to, this is Joelle. I just wanted to, I think, so Yvonne named two kind of axes that you could use to assess different action ideas. One is, your sense of the environmental impact of a particular activity, and then a second one is, where is there volunteer energy that's going to actually be ready to make such a activity happen? And I just wanted to raise a third possible sort of analysis point, which is how much will the activity engage the whole community in a visible way? So one thing that sometimes comes up when I talk to folks in congregations is that, improving the energy efficiency of the building is extremely impactful often, and one of the most significant things the congregation can do from an impact perspective. But unless it's done very carefully, it may be almost entirely invisible to the congregation. Whereas something like shifting to reusable dishes and fair trade coffee at coffee hour or at Kiddush is a transformative, has a different type of and more nebulous type of environmental impact, but it's incredibly visible because it affects how the community eats together every single week. And so I think that's just another way to, we're not answering your question exactly, but I think in terms of the things you might consider, one is environmental impact, one is present community enthusiasm, and then a third sort of area of analysis is how much will this work to advance this conversation in our community and make these concerns really visible to everyone who's part of our community. And I just would add that as another question to ask yourself in assessing options. I also wanted to share a comment that came to us from Wendy Bevins, our rock star over at First Trinity Lutheran downtown in DC. She said, can you try to join with other churches in your geographic area or with the next level up in the church's hierarchy that you can join forces with to go for a county level goal like carbon reductions or lobbying for local legislation or part of the Presbyterian church that you're part of? And I happen to know that both are possible for David's community. David is also the head of the National Capital Area Presbyteries Earth Care group that is just such a just such a denominational group that helps Presbyterian churches coordinate on green initiatives in this region. And as well, the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions in Fairfax is providing an opportunity for groups like congregations like David's Church to work together on county level advocacy opportunities. But I think Wendy's point is very well taken for anyone else on the call to think about, are there ways to be acting in a slightly more coordinated fashion, either through IPL or through your denomination or through just very regional collaboration of your congregations right in your neighborhood so that you feel like you're able to have a larger impact through collective action.
And this is Jose, and I wanted to put in a plug for the faith tradition angle. Working on the national level, we recognize that many of the faith traditions can't take very strong positions because their national constituency is so diverse in their political views, but that there is a growing greening within many of the mainstream denominations that are resulting in, for example, the UCC and the Unitarian Universalists to come out on either a regional scale or a national scale for divestment from fossil fuels. And so we're also seeing, for example, the Episcopal Church, the presiding bishop, Catherine Jefferts Shorey, has always been a strong advocate on climate change, but what many of the mainstream denominations need is increased advocacy from the diocesan levels, from the congregational levels that are calling for this, so that they're starting to be steered in that green direction.
A good point. Joel, Yvonne, and Jose, these are all excellent points. I think we're moving in directions that that a bunch of you have already suggested, and it's nice to have it crystallized in this way. I like the way that you articulated how a strategy might be developed. I was thinking mostly in terms of environmental impact, but you're right that the other parts of it are very important, to find people that have energy in certain areas and to join with people of the same denomination and other denominations in the community. And we've actually done a bunch of these things or are moving in that direction, but it's nice to have it crystallized in kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4 fashion. That's a good way for me to present it to my team and suggest that ways in which we might be able to grow the greening effort that we've been doing. So I thank you very much for this, for the advice.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing where you're at. So we're going to, well, actually, we had a good question that came at the end of the question and answer time about engaging in international advocacy issues. We didn't talk at all about international climate advocacy, but many congregations are very, have strong heart ties to different parts of the world where they've been doing mission work or where the community members' families came from. And so it's a good question. Is there an opportunity for congregations to do international environmental advocacy? And Karen shared some ideas about doing advocacy around or activism around UN climate conferences when those come up. And Yvonne wanted to share some thoughts too.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, so this is so new that I don't think there are a lot of details yet planned for it. But I understand that in September, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is hosting a climate leadership summit for heads of state from around the world to come to New York City and spend a day announcing pledges of how they'll take action to address the climate crisis. And the 350.org is planning a major mobilization around that event. So that seems to me to be a really quite good opportunity to not have to travel to like Bali or something to really be able to make a mark and express the importance of that. So I don't know if IPL is following that. I'm sort of guessing that as it moves forward that we'll hear about it. And I think that might be a great opportunity for people to get involved and be involved and bring their communities to this kind of international activity.
Awesome. Thank you.
If I could add something, actually the faith community is working in concert right now for a concerted interfaith effort with regard to that climate summit that's separate and apart from the 350 effort. And the World Council of Churches is one of the main shepherds of this. But one of the most encouraging things I've seen about this is that my peers here in Washington, D.C., who are lobbyists for their faith traditions, we're all coming to the table and joining hands. One of the examples is, for example, that the World Council of Churches is going to put out some kind of faith statement. They're looking for 30 international and national leaders to sign it, but they're also open to what we have asked for, is to share that statement with our faith traditions and then have it winnow out or spread out across the country so that individuals from their faith perspectives can voice their support through some kind of online petition campaign, either done collectively in some way, so that we can show to the world and we can show to Congress and the President, we have, for example, 100,000, 200,000 people speaking from their faith traditions concerned about climate. We support action. So this is all very developing right now, but it's very exciting to see this kind of concerted, unified effort by the faith community.
That's awesome. I hope we hear more about that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to be in community with all of you tonight. I really valued each and every speaker's comments and then also the questions and conversation that we had with those on the phone. We're at time, so I just want to highlight a few upcoming IPL resources, opportunities, and activities. But of course, please do make sure you're getting our emails and connected with us on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot so that we can be in conversation all year long. This Saturday, there are two different opportunities. There's a Northern Virginia Congregations Climate Gathering that on Saturday afternoon that will give congregational Green Team leaders a chance to share strategies and resources and activities. And then there's that same day a multi-faith contingent in a large protest to try and speak out against the Keystone XL pipeline. If you pay an energy bill in either Maryland or DC, our community power program for homes, which we do together with a group called Groundswell, has just obtained pretty good rates for residential energy, clean energy, and you can opt in for about a month to get to hop on board the prices that our group was able to secure. And the details about that are in our last email if you are on our email list. And then we are really, we continue to make this year, 2014, the year of the green sheep with not only these webinars, but office hours. So Thursday, May 15th, I will be seated at Glenn's Garden Market in DuPont Circle all day long. And folks who want some support as green leaders in thinking about some of the struggles or opportunities or activities at your own congregation can contact our office and sign up for a time slot to come just sit over coffee and chat. And then our next webinar will be on greening the grounds of your congregation, thinking about everything you can do outside the building to reflect your values. And that will be on Thursday, May 22nd, also at 7:30. And I think with that, we will thank everyone so much for being, flocking together with us tonight, and have a very good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.